Hi, in today's session we are going to learn about information security. We'll also see what is the importance of information security, the CIA principles of information security, and also go through the different types of attacks involved in it, through which we need to keep our data secure. So let's start with it. What is information security? So it is a field of computer science which refers to the process or the methodologies used to protect the digital data and other kind of information. As you know, computer science basically consists of different sort of tools, or we can say the different sort of algorithms are there, processes are there, which keeps our data protected from unauthorized access. So, it includes the design strategies to protect the information present in the computer systems from unauthorized access, theft, natural disasters, etc. What is the importance of computer security or information security? So, for any organization, or even if we talk about our individually, information is very important for us, right? We need to keep our information secure, right? So for example, financial organizations are there, like banks are there. They need to keep their data secure. They don't want to leak the data. They don't want their data to be exposed, right? The information to be exposed. Similarly, there are some medical organizations like hospitals or that they don't like to leak or they don't like to expose the data, right? So that is very important. I mean, security is important in that context also. Then we have social media post. Even individually, if we talk personally, we have our cell phones, we have our smartphones. There are photos, videos. I want that data to be secure. Suppose I'm communicating with someone via internet, I'm sending emails, I'm chatting through WhatsApp, whatever the data, whatever the information there is, you want it to be secure because information is very important for us. We don't want that information to be exposed or leaked or to be accessed by some unauthorized person. So this is the actual importance of information security. So let's go through the principles of information security. So principles of information security. So there are basically three main principles of information security. It is also called as CIA trade, where C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for availability. We'll go through this each and every principle in detail. Confidentiality. The term itself suggests the data or whatever the information that you are having, you need to keep that information confidential, right? Then only you can say that your information is secure. For example, suppose I have my login IDs, my passwords, my OTPs, my ATM card PIN number. These all data need to be kept confidential, right? So this is the first major principle of information security, which is the mechanism which is designed to prevent the sensitive information from unauthorized access. For example, bank account details or anything else like login ID, passwords. The second important principle of information security is integrity. So it basically involves maintaining the consistency, the accuracy, the trustworthiness of data over its entire life. So basically integrity is what? Whenever you are transmitting the data, okay, or whenever you are performing some sort of operation on your data or information, you need to keep its consistency intact. You need to keep its accuracy. So that basically is the integrity. We'll go through when we'll study the about attacks, the different types of attacks. At that time, you'll understand this concept of integrity in a more better way. So we'll go through it in detail in the few further slides. Then the third major principle is availability. Now, whatever the information that you are storing, right, it needs to be available every time whenever you want it to, right? Suppose I want to access my bank, it should be available for me, right? Means this principle basically deals with what? That the information should be always available to the authorized user whenever needed. Suppose I want to access my account balance. I am an authorized user of my account. So my bank servers should be available for me to show me my bank details or my bank balance, whatever it may be. Right? So that is the availability concept. So there are three major principles. Confidentiality means keeping your information confidential, hiding it from unauthorized people, right? Then the second thing is integrity, that is maintaining the consistency or the accuracy of your data so that no other unauthorized user should modify it or change the data. Similarly, the third very important principle is availability, which basically deals with ensuring that the information should be available to the authorized user every time whenever it demands, whenever it is needed. Okay, so let's go to the next thing now. Security attacks. This is very important topic. Unless and until you understand these, what attacks are, what are the different types of attack, you won't understand the importance of information security. Okay, so these are the unauthorized or illegal actions that are taken against the government, corporate or private IT assets in order to destroy, modify or steal the sensitive data. They are further classified into active and passive attacks. So basically the attack is nothing but what? An action, an illegal action that is taken place over your data, your information, right? And these attacks are broadly classified into two parts or two categories, that is the active attacks and passive attacks. So let's go through what is active attacks and what is passive attacks. Passive attacks, the name itself suggests passive. Means what? Let's go through it. So in passive attacks, the attacker observes the messages, then copy and send them, save them and can use it for malicious purposes. Okay. So these are the attacks where the attackers basically does not modify your messages or does not modify your information or data. It is just accessing it. There is no harm to the integrity of your data or your information. But obviously the confidentiality is obviously harmed due to these types of attacks. So see, here the attacker does not try to change the information or the content he or she gathered. Although passive attacks do not harm the systems, but they can be danger for the confidentiality of the messages. Now for example, suppose there are two friends, they are communicating with each other, okay, and there is one more third party sitting over there, there is one more third person sitting over there who is just listening silently to the messages or to the talk that those two friends are chatting about, okay, they are talking about. So these two friends are not aware that the third person is listening to whatever they are communicating. Okay, so such sort of attacks is what? Passive attacks, where the attacker just observes the messages. It does not alter or modifies the content of the messages, nothing like that. But yes, such sort of types of attacks harms your confidentiality of the message, right? Because you suppose the friends are talking something very confidential and the third person is listening to it, so obviously the confidentiality will be harmed or will be violated, right? So such sort of attacks are called as passive attacks, where the content of the messages or whatever the data which is being gathered from the attackers is not being modified or altered. Okay, so there are two types of passive attacks actually. The first one is the release of message content and the second one is traffic analysis. So what is this release of message content? Now see here in this diagram, there is one person called Lily and John. These are the two persons which are communicating through each other to each other through this internet. Okay. Now Bob is what? Bob is the attacker. So what Bob is doing, whatever the messages that Lily is sending to John, Bob is trying to hack those messages. Means it is trying to read the content of those messages which Lily is sending to John. So such sort of thing is what? It is a passive attack. Here Lily is not aware whether this Bob is there or not and what he is reading. No, she's thinking that she is communicating with John directly. There is no third man involved in this communication. There is no one who is listening. But suppose think if Lily is communicating some important confidential data to John. At that time, this Bob, the attacker, he is fetching all the messages which Lily is sending to John, and he is accessing those messages. He is reading those messages, right? So this is nothing but what? It is the passive attack. Okay. So here the content of the message is released and read by the attacker, and obviously here the confidentiality is violated, because our main principle, right, information security's major principle includes what? Confidentiality. That means what? That whatever the messages is there, or whatever the data, whatever the information is there, it should be accessible to only to the authorized user. But here in this case, Lily and John are the authorized user which are communicating with each other, but there is a third man, third party involved, that is Bob, who is unauthorized, and still he is able to read the messages or whatever the data that is being exchanged between Lily and John. So obviously here the confidentiality principle is violated. So this is one type of passive attack, whereas the second type of the passive attack is traffic analysis. Now suppose in this case, the Lily is sending some sort of messages to John. Now instead of directly sending the messages, if Lily encrypts this message, means if she uses some sort of code language to send this message to the John, then Bob will not understand what messages Lily has sent to John. Right, he'll not able to understand because they are communicating in some sort of code language. Okay, so in that case Bob will not be able to understand whatever the messages or whatever the data that is being exchanged between Lily and John, right? So even Bob tried to fetch those messages, but it will be very difficult for Bob to understand what exactly Lily wants to send to John and that all thing, right? So this is one, what we can say, counterpart, or this is one prevention, right, through which we can just handle this release of message content. Okay, but the second type of attack is what? Traffic analysis. Suppose if they are communicating through code language also, and Bob is trying to fetch all the messages and trying to read the messages, even though he is not able to understand the message, but yes, one thing that he will understand is the traffic. Traffic means what? So we all know traffic in terms of internet means what? The amount of the packets or the amount of messages that is being sent from sender to the receiver, the sender's ID, the sender's IP addresses or the location of the sender, the receiver's IP addresses and its location. So these all things is included in this traffic analysis. So Bob, even though if he does not understand what message is being shared between Lily and John, but yes, he will try to observe the pattern of messages. He will try to identify the location of Lily or the location of John. Even they'll try on what time the communication takes place, what amount of packets or what amount of messages are being shared, what is the length of the messages. So such sort of analysis can be done even if Lily and John are communicating through a better encrypted way, right, or in an encoded format, right? I mean, suppose if they are communicating in some sort of code language, so at that time Bob will not be able to understand it, but it will create such sort of problem by doing the traffic analysis. Okay, so suppose that we have a way of masking, that is encrypting the information so that the attacker, even if captured the message, could not extract any information from the message. So the opponent could determine the location, the identity of the communicating host, and could observe the frequency and the length of the messages being exchanged, as I told you earlier. Okay, that even though they are communicating via an encrypted channel, but Bob will use those messages not to understand what they are communicating, but yes, he can able to find out the locations of the sender and the receiver, the pattern of the messages, the identity, or some sort of other data, right? Which is not good. Exactly. Now, these were the two types of passive attacks. Now we'll talk about active attacks. So in active attacks, as I told you earlier, attacks are basically of two types: passive attack and active attack. In passive attack, the attackers are just keeping a spy or keeping an eye on your messages. They are not modifying or altering the messages or the data or whatever the information that is being shared. Okay, but whereas the active attacks is basically here the attacker's main intention is to attack the data. Attack the data means what? Its main intention is to alter or modify the data and do certain sort of problems, to create certain sort of problems for sender and receiver. So let's see what exactly these active attacks are and the types of active attacks. So in active attacks, the attacker intercepts the connection and efforts to modify the message content. It is dangerous for integrity and availability of the message. See, passive attacks basically violates the confidentiality principle, whereas active attacks are involved in violating the integrity as well as the availability of the information that is being shared. Active attacks involves masquerade, modification of messages, repudiation, replay, denial of services. These are the different types of active attacks. The system resources can be changed due to active attacks. So the damage done with the active attacks can be harmful to the system and its resources. Okay. So what are the different types of active attacks? So the first one is masquerade, replay, and denial of service. We'll see each of them with very clear description and with a very good example. So let's see masquerade attack. So here you can see Lily is communicating with John. They are communicating, they are sending some sort of information to John via internet. Okay. And now this masquerade attack is what? Here the attacker. See, let's read this and then I'll explain you. A masquerade attack takes place when one entity pretends to be a different entity. So here this Bob is trying to pretend to be Lily. Means what? Lily and John are friends. They are communicating through suppose email. Okay. And Bob, what Bob has done? Bob has hacked the email ID and password of Lily, and now he is communicating with John pretending to be Lily. So what John is thinking? He is thinking that he is communicating to Lily, but Lily is not actually sending the messages. The message who is sending is the Bob, right? And why this Bob is able to send the message as Lily to John? Because he has hacked the IDs and the passwords. He has stolen the ID passwords of Lily. Okay, and with the help of that he is able to access it. But this type of access is unauthorized access because Bob is not the authorized person. Though even he has stolen the IDs and passwords, but he is still able to communicate with John. Okay, so such sort of attack is called as masquerade attack, where a third person, where some entity tries to pretend to be some another entity. जैसे कि for here, in this case, Bob is trying to pretend to be Lily. Okay, because he has logged into the system with Lily's ID and password, and now he is chatting with John, and John is thinking that he is communicating with Lily, but actually he is communicating with Bob. So here obviously the first thing that is being violated is the confidentiality as well as the integrity, because the Lily has not kept his ID and passwords confidential, right? With some or the other reason or in some or the other way, Bob has robbed or Bob has stolen the Lily's ID and password. So hence that thing was not kept confidential, and now Bob is sending the messages which Lily has not sent to the John. Okay, that means what? Bob is altering the messages, or Bob is sending some different messages which are not sent from Lily. That means the integrity of the information is being violated. Okay, so this is your masquerade attack. Okay, now let's see the second type of attack, that is the relay attack. So it involves the passive capture of the message and its subsequent transmission to produce an authorized effect. So what this relay is actually, here suppose Bob and Alice are communicating to each other. Okay, now Bob wants to send some message to Alice. Suppose Bob wants to send ki we will meet at 5 p.m. today. Okay, so you want to send a message that we have to meet today at 5 p.m. or meeting is at 5 p.m. Okay, but the third person, the hacker, what it does, it captures the message which is being sent by Bob. It modifies the message and that modified message is sent to Alice. Suppose Bob wanted to send that meeting is at 5 p.m. But what attacker has done? The hacker has modified the message. Instead of 5 p.m. he is telling that the meeting is at 10 p.m. Okay, and then that modified message is sent to the Alice. So actually Bob wanted to tell Alice that meeting is at 5 p.m. But Alice has received a message which shows that meeting is at 10 p.m. Right? Means here what exactly is done? Here the message, whatever the message is there, it is being modified. It is being altered. So obviously here integrity is violated. Integrity means what? Whatever the message that Bob sends, it goes to the Alice as it is. That we can say that the integrity is maintained. But here the integrity is violated because the message which is sent by Bob to Alice is modified or altered by the hacker or the attacker, and that modified message is back sent to the Alice. Okay, so such sort of attack is called as the relay attack, and relay attack basically violates the integrity principle of information security. Now let's go through the third and the last type of attack, that is the denial of service attack. The name itself suggests. So here what exactly happens? Here the attacker, now this is basically a scenario where you'll be so this is basically a scenario where you have a server, okay, or what the attacker does actually, it sends unnecessary requests to the server, a huge number of requests to the server, which makes server irresponsible, hang ho jata hai, right? It does not respond. That means what? The attacker is making the server irresponsible or unavailable, basically irresponsive bana deta hai, and it makes the server unavailable to the other authorized users. Okay, now for example, suppose Bob want to send some message to Alice, but what the attacker does, attacker is continuously sending some sort of messages to Alice. Okay, and Alice is being overloaded with the messages. Okay, and Alice has become its performance has been degraded, right? The server's performance has been degraded, which obviously lead to what? The violation of the availability principle. Okay, so this is nothing but the denial of service, where the server will not be able to provide the service to the authorized user because it is become unavailable, because its performance has been degraded, because of this attacker has sent means huge number of unknown or invalid requests to the server, which made the server unavailable or irresponsive. Okay, for example, see for example, suppose if it's a result day, okay, and we all go to the university website, huge number of students, right, thousands of students are accessing the university website, the server of the university, to retrieve their results. Now what attacker does is what? The attacker will send unnecessarily it will send the request to the server. Okay, and then because of this huge number of requests at the server side, so server will become what? It will hang, right? Its performance will degrade, it will not able to respond, it will not able to process the request. That means what? It is not able to service, it is not able to provide the service to the authorized users, right? And hence such sort of attack is called as the denial of service attack, where the server denies from providing the services to the authorized users because this attacker has overloaded the server with some unauthorized and unnecessary requests. Okay, so this is the third and the last type of attack, that is the active attack, right? Denial of service attack. So let's go through again. Once again, we'll just this is the end of the session. So we'll just quickly summarize what exactly we have learned through today. So we have talked about what is information security, why it is important, because the information is very important for us and hence we need to keep our information secure. So from what things we have to keep our information secure? So we have also learned about the different types of attacks, right? The active attacks and the passive attacks. Okay, so we need to keep our information secure from such sort of attacks. Okay, we have also talked about the principles, the information security principles, that is the CIA triad, that is confidentiality, integrity and availability. Okay, we have also talked about which type of attack involves violating the which principle, right? Means which type of attack violates what principle of information security. As if we have talked about masquerade attack, where the one person is trying to pretend some another person and it's communicating with the authorized user. So there the confidentiality is violated as well as the integrity is violated. Even in the case of relay attack, the integrity of the messages or the integrity of the information is violated. Similarly here in the previous one, right, this denial of service attack, here the very important principle, that is the availability, right? The availability principle is violated because the attacker is continuously sending illegal request or unwanted request to the server, and here the server is overloaded and hence it is not able to provide the service to the user. Means he is not able to be available to the user, to the authorized user, and hence this causes the violation or the degradation of availability principle. That's it. We'll sign off over here. Hope you have understand all the concepts. Thank you.